Welcome back, everybody. This lecture, much shorter one than the last one, is entitled, if I could give it one, What is Philosophy? And actually, why philosophy? That's a more important question. Philosophy simply is, for most laymen, most persons, the love of wisdom. Sophia, wisdom, philo, right? Love of wisdom. And as I said before, wisdom can often, most of the time, be interchanged with knowledge. Because you have to know something to be wise, obviously, right? But because a person is knowledgeable, has head knowledge perhaps, knowledge nowadays, especially in a scientific, empirical setting that we live in, is often data. And even technical persons who manage systems of knowledge, knowledge management persons, library science, these folks are actually doing philosophy, very important philosophy, whether they know it or not, in the very fact that they are distinguishing mere data from workable, meaningful knowledge, right? So I think more accurately, the distinction would be raw data versus information, right? That information adds meaning, right? It's actionable, it's worth something than just mere data. Think of it as noise versus music, right? A lot of times, if there's a certain type of music you don't like, I don't know the genre of it, but one type that I personally don't like is it's screamo or something like that. Oh, to me that's not music. I have no offense for some of you who consider that a high art form, but every person has a type of music that they like or don't. And if you go to a concert, if your friend's really into it, if you're dating someone and you're like, oh man, you gotta go see this band. You go to this band, it's horrible. To you, it's just noise. Just noise. Not even like tolerable noise like music, elevator music or something, light jazz or something like that, but bothersome, like it hurts you, right? Noise. But to your buddy, your friend, or the person you're dating, the fan of that music, it is art, right? It's meaningful noise, not noise, but it's music to their ears. So in the same way, knowledge can be distinguished from wisdom. Wisdom it implies clearly a certain value, a set of values, a valuation going on or already there, right? Whether one knows it or not. Um, Wisdom means not a technical notion because so many different definitions of wisdom exist. But if I may offer, wisdom is a knowledge of the good, right? It's some relation of a particular piece of knowledge or know-how with the good. Is knowledge just not for the sake of filling your head with more data, more information, but knowledge of the good and for the good? And what do we mean by that? Ethics, or in philosophy we prefer to call it moral philosophy. Or in theology, they always talk about the good too, because the good that is implied in theology is of a certain God. Christian theology is talking about the Christian God as the perfect good, the highest good, the summa bonum, as it's called. Uh, for secular philosophers, they talk about the good as the good life, the good human life. The idea of the good for some philosophers who are more idealistic. Well, so the wise person has some know-how of pursuing and achieving the good life in a way that a mere person with knowledge, technical knowledge, may not be able to have. Right? So, as an example, in classic Greek philosophy, you'll read these people, Socrates, Plato, right? Um, well, they assume that the wise person, they assume that the good person is a knowledgeable person. What are you talking about? I know a lot of people who have all these fancy degrees that aren't good people. You might say, or I know my grandmother who never had beyond an 8th grade, if that, education, and she's a very wise person. So we might make distinctions that are a little different, but to the classic philosophers, the knowledge that they're talking about, and the most important knowledge that they're talking about, is this knowledge of the form of the good, as Plato says. What is this form of the good? We'll get into that a bit later as well, but the gist of it is that all things have a certain idea associated with them, and the highest idea is the idea of the good. And when I first learned this is rather strange. It's, well, I'm studying philosophy. Why are you dragging this discussion toward ethics, to values, right? Isn't philosophy kind of like science in a way? It's just knowledge per se without values? But what the ancient Greeks were onto, and many people still agree with this, is that the desire for knowledge, what things one desires to know, and even the desire to know per se, are in fact good things, or associated with a certain good, an idea of the good, without which there wouldn't be this knowledge of, or this desire for knowledge. I hope that makes sense to some of you. Perhaps I'm not explaining it in the best way. I apologize. So, a knowledge of a person is not necessarily good. Why? Because they might not have knowledge of the form of the good, the highest idea that there is. That is in the classic, that's a classic mindset. Now, for us, knowledge has no necessary relationship with the good. Or does it? And this is one of the questions we'll examine throughout this course. One of the thinkers that you'll read is Francis Bacon, the modern empiricist. And Francis Bacon is the one who famously said, knowledge is power. So that's a different understanding what knowledge is. Knowledge is not necessarily related to the good morality, but it's related to power, which is a much more important need, or even a part of human nature, as some philosophers, more modern philosophers, say. Nietzsche, for instance, says the will to power, right? That is the nature of humankind. So this innocent question about wisdom and knowledge, is it interchangeable, can lead to all sorts of fascinating questions, as you could see. But for most purposes, when we say love of wisdom, it also includes love of knowledge, right? So, if any of you love knowledge, love wisdom, then you are already technically a philosopher, right, in the literal sense. But it's not enough, of course, right? Philosophy also implies certain methods of thinking, ways of thinking. One branch of philosophy is logic. They're solely interested in the rules of right thinking, the rules of clear thought. Critical thinking, that's a catchphrase nowadays. Every university wants to teach their students how to think critically. Every company wants their employees to think critically out of the box and all this sort of stuff. In taking this philosophy course, in taking any properly taught philosophy course, you will learn to think critically, because you can't do philosophy without thinking critically. In fact, philosophy is thinking critically. So critical thinking, there's a lot of courses, seminars on teaching people how to think critically. Reductions of philosophy. It's pretty much what it is, right? So one of the important concepts in critical thought or critical thinking is the difference between plausible and implausible. Well, it should be obvious to many of you, but sometimes it really isn't, right? For instance, what is plausibility? I can't assume that we all know what we're talking about here, but if someone has a view, a conclusion, a position that you disagree with, but you examine their reasoning, you might say, that's a plausible position. I don't agree with it, but that's plausible. So what plausibility means there is that it's a reasonable way for a rational being to think. Again, you don't agree with that position, the conclusion, but you could see how a rational person could go there. Yet, there are other positions that are implausible. No good reasons how to back up a certain claim. And there you must conclude that this person either is irrational, unreasonable, either they lack those capacities, or they simply don't care. Each of us might be guilty of that at least one time in our lives or another. Maybe our whole lives for some of us are that way. We intentionally ignore evidence or good reasons to believe a certain thing or hold a certain position. Why? Because we prefer to have that position, irrespective of whatever stands in the way, including good reasons. Right? So one of the benefits or the values of critical thought, which is really philosophical thinking, is to distinguish good reasons for belief and bad reasons for belief. Right? And again, I'm using these terms good and bad, not necessarily in the classic sense where good means morally good, although you could argue it that way, right? Can we use the term good in any way that's non-moral? So another way of asking this is every statement of the word good necessarily an ethical judgment? Next year, we're going to vote for the President of the United States. A good person should run this country, you might say. Well, that's clearly some value-laden statement, right? You have some notion of what a good person is, a good direction, a good society, a good world is, right? So clearly there's value there. But what about, I had a good breakfast this morning. I actually didn't have breakfast, but yeah, hopefully my stomach is not, you don't hear that here. But what's a good breakfast? Is there any value to that? Moral value is what I'm saying. Is there some moral judgment to there? Right? No, it doesn't really matter, ethically speaking, in the grand scheme of the universe, whether you ate sausage and eggs or you ate oatmeal this morning, right? But yet we use that same word good to describe all sorts of things. I worship a good God. This is a good country. I have a good wife. I have good breakfast today. Last night I had good sex with my partner. Or this afternoon I'm going to go see a good movie. Good times. Can the same word apply to all of these different things? What we assume are maybe different classes of things, different classes of objects. Very good question, on which philosophers disagree strongly. So it's not all that innocent when we say philosophy is the love of wisdom, and wisdom is implied in there, at least in the classic sense, is some valuable knowledge, some good knowledge, right? Rather than just mere knowledge, stuff you just fill your head with, or maybe even bad knowledge. Can knowledge ever be bad? Are there certain things that we should not know because that will make us worse human beings? Or society, it'll make us worse as a civilization, as a species? What are examples of this? I don't know. Are there certain arts we shouldn't go into? If you believe in magic, there's a so-called dark arts, right? Doctor Strange, comic book hero. I think they're going to make a movie about him next year or something like that. Look out for that. He crosses the line at one point of his journey, and he goes into the dark arts for the sake of the good. He has to save the universe, but the only powers that can possibly save the universe in this situation is he has to actually master the dark arts, a thing that, an area that he vowed never to go into, right? Because he's a magician of the good arts, right? I don't know if they call it the white arts or whatever, but the good magicians. So he crosses over and he figuratively sells his soul. I'm not sure if even literally in that tale he sells his soul, but he does save the universe, but now he's forever tainted, right? So there's a strong knowledge of certain knowledge you should not know. Um, Scientifically, are there certain knowledge paths that we should not go down? Uh, Human cloning. If what some of the researchers say, um, some of the aggressive projections are within our lifetime, but maybe not that soon. But I mean, foreseeably in the near future, right? Relatively speaking, if we continue to go down that research path, we could probably, I would actually be surprised if we weren't able to clone the human being at some point later in time, right? Right, we were already doing it with, with sheep, cats as well, right? I heard that there's a service that if your dear cat dies, you could pay, I think, like $30,000 to produce a genetic copy of your favorite cat that passed away. So we could already do that. We cloned that. Human beings is probably just a matter of time. But is that a path we want to go down, right? So are there certain knowledge, types of knowledge that are not necessarily good, if or even bad, right? Morally wrong. So love of wisdom implies also a decent human being. Now, the strong implication, right? They don't come out and say this, but the classic philosophers imply that the philosopher must also be a good person. Why? Because it is only the philosopher that sees the highest form, highest idea of reality, the good, in its pure, or in its least hazy state, right? We are not gods, we don't have perfect minds, perfect knowledge, but the philosophers are the type of people, the intellectually elite within our society that is able to perceive this highest form of the good in its most clear state. So that implies strongly that you cannot have a bad person be a philosopher, right? In our day, that's ridiculous, right? Just because you study philosophy doesn't mean that you're a good person, right? I like to pat myself on the shoulder and think, so, maybe I personally think, yeah, I'm a pretty good guy. You might disagree. Other people might disagree. Or you might know just an asshole philosopher, right? There clearly is, right? So it doesn't apply nowadays. Or it's a stretch. You have to work at it hard. So what is philosophy is not a simple question to ask, but for our intents and purposes, love of wisdom will suffice. More importantly, though, is why study philosophy? Or why philosophy? Why is philosophy even a necessary course of study nowadays? Many of you who are taking this course are taking this to fulfill a gen ed course, probably most of you. A few of you are actually interested in philosophy, so even if you weren't required to take a course like this, you would take it. Glad to have you all, right? But if you're being honest, almost all of your parents who are perhaps paying your tuition, or almost all of you, want a college education to get a good job, to do well in life, to live comfortably in life, right? Nothing wrong with that, right? In fact, many philosophers will agree with that. But aren't other courses of study better, more efficient? Aren't they going to be more efficient and more effective to get you to where you want to be, right? A nice life, a comfortable life. Accounting, nursing, medicine, computer science, all of these much more profitable courses of study. So why philosophy? Well, one of the practical benefits, and here the purists, the hardcore philosopher, knowledge for its own sake, wisdom for its own sake, they would be offended to even go down this route. They refuse to, because they will say, as soon as you even address the practical benefits of philosophy, that's a lost cause. That's tainted already. Those people aren't really, they're primitives. They don't deserve pure philosophy. I'm not going to be snotty like that. I realize, and I agree with Aristotle, in fact, that the happy life must include what he calls external goods as well. right? You can't really call yourself, you can't really insist, in all honesty, that you're really happy in life, or as happy as you could be if you don't have some of these external goods. So there he disagrees with his predecessors, Plato and Socrates, who are more rigorous, or certainly other people, more extreme persons within that time, called the Stoics. The Stoics literally believe, or at least they said to believe, that you could burn them at the stake. Their children could die, their businesses could fail, their reputations could be ruined, but they were equally content. They even used the word happy, right? That the state of the soul should not be moved up or down by external factors. Aristotle disagrees, and I tend to side with him. I think most of you agree there. But Aristotle was a philosopher, so he would certainly disagree with some of you who are practical persons, who would say that then philosophy has no need at all. There are clearly values to philosophy. So what I challenge you to do this week is to read the assigned readings, the Atlantic article, and the data from that Google Sites article. See if you agree with the practical benefits of philosophy. This is true. Computer science companies, right? They seek programmers. They often seek philosophy majors, and also interestingly, classics majors, right? There's like this weird disproportionate number of philosophy and classics majors in the computer sciences. You're like, what the heck, right? But apparently, those folks have been proven. Otherwise, they wouldn't be recruited by these companies, right? So for the self-interest of these coding companies, they pursue a lot of philosophy and classics majors even, right? There is strong data that seems to indicate that you will not really lose out on certainly taking a philosophy course, but even if you choose to become a philosophy major, right? In certain ways, it helps a lot. Many pre-law students, for instance, take philosophy courses because why? It helps them on the LSAT, the test for law school, because the law school tests have a logic section, a reasoning section, and studying philosophy is one very good way of developing those skills. Some of you will study this course or take this course and maybe even become philosophy majors because you fell in love with this type of knowledge, this type of outlook, this type of thinking, approach to life. The pure philosophers will go that route. Others, I hope even the very practically minded persons, will see a value to philosophy. It doesn't even have to be tangible values in terms of how much will this yield in future dollars for me. But there are values that are intangible. Absolutely. Absolutely, there are intangible values. Intrinsic value, some of you might say. Knowledge has a value in and of itself that is beyond mere instrumental value, knowledge for some other sake, right? Some of you, the sick ones in the course, take a pleasure in reading Kant or Plato, right? Others, you'll suffer through it, you'll have to tolerate it, but some of you take great pleasure. So for you, it's actually a pleasant experience. So whatever the reason, I hope you do at least think about why philosophy is required by your university, why philosophy still exists in our day and age, and why you are taking this course above and beyond the mere practical need to perhaps fill a general course. So I look forward to your responses in our discussion and throughout the course, and I'm interested in how the demographics in our course in our two sections will line out as far as these reasons. It'd be interesting if we did some sort of poll, why philosophy? Maybe I'll draw that up or something like that, but I don't want to give you any additional work, So yes, so keep these in mind, and maybe it'd be an interesting topic to think about in your group discussions as well. See you later. Thank you.